So numbers 10 and 9 were already such mind-blowingly amazing pieces of artistic works. Well then, who is going to be able to outdo those two megastars? Who's going to be the first one to beat the stupendous Nintendo GameCube and the awe-inspiring PlayStation 4's designs? Why, it can only be the spectacularly looking Sega Saturn. Releasing on November 22nd of 1994, it was one of the first mainstream hits of the 32-bit consoles generation, and though it would go on to sell a pretty paltry, overall, 9.26 million units. At least for this list, it was one of the more gorgeously designed ones of that entire era. And it was also one of the first mainstream consoles, as well, to really showcase that fairly new and high-tech CD-ROM technology that the consoles industry was just starting to really embrace and to migrate over to from that classic, and oh so well popularized ROM cartridge format at that time. And speaking of high-tech, the Saturn had quite the high-tech, sleek, and futuristic appearance for the time to go along with all of that relatively new and high technology that it was sporting on its inside too. I'd say it was just really cleanly designed and just had an overall really amazingly cool look and a cool aesthetic to it all. And that's how it's been able to find itself on this list at this number 8 spot. So this has been Sega's first appearance on this particular top 10 collection. But are they going to have any more? Or is this going to be their only appearance for its entirety? Well, forgive me if this is a foreshadowing or even if it sounds spoilery, because I want to say this about good old Sega right at the outset here, because I still got a big soft spot for them in my heart, and have always seen them as the underdog through each and every single console's war and generation that they were still contending in. And that thing that I want to say about them is that I don't think Sega has ever won any of those console generation wars, though they undoubtedly tried and tried very hard. So whether it might have been because of having inferior technologies, or perhaps even just too many poor decisions and too much mismanagement from the top, whatever it was, they just couldn't catch a break, it seemed, and just kept on losing with one generation after another after another. If they weren't getting beat pretty badly by Nintendo, then it was going to be by somebody else like Sony. Well, there was at least one thing that they almost always had going for them, though, through just about each and every console generation, and that was their highly winning and highly impressive console designs. That is something that not enough people have realized about them, and not enough have recognized them for it. So, like I said, this is their first appearance, and who knows if they're going to be making any more appearances on this list that just happens to be all about this area and talent that they have absolutely dominated in over the decades. But anyways, so the Saturn is our 8th place finisher, and its looks have aged quite nicely and still hold up quite well to this day, I would say. And at this number 8 spot is where it's going to stay. So let's continue to climb even higher on this unique list and make our way to its next place finisher. So who now are we going to find at this lucky number 7 spot on this really particular and unique list such as this? Well, would y'all look at that? It's another Sega console, the Genesis. This time, releasing even further back on November 21st of 1990, and going on to do a total of 30.75 million units in sales. And there were actually 2 models or versions of the Genesis, both that we're going to be going over. But more importantly for this list, both the original and the revised version were equally beautiful and gorgeous to the eyes, with the original having a lovely classic or old school design with a lot of that old school beauty and charm, and all of it done superbly as only Sega could. The second model or version streamlined everything, looked more cutesy, and just gave it a much more modernized appearance for its time, as well as it also having a smaller form factor, thanks to that taking away of parts like that headphone jack. And also remember how I said that they have basically always been great with all of their home console designs? Well, you're about to find out how true and strongly that has always held up. Because if you had to pick and choose between these 2 versions of the Genesis, which would you choose? We've got 2 very uniquely different and distinct console designs for the same console within the same generation, but they're still equally as great as one another. I'd say it's going to very much be like choosing between a Lamborghini or Ferrari. Tough choice and a tough call, eh? Because I know I would have a very hard time picking one over the other. And that's how you know a console maker has been so great with their console design game. And yes, once again, Even though Sega might not have been so great at that actual gaming game, but with this design thing, and with what this list has been all about in this console's war, at least they've always been consistently good with the exterior designs of their home gaming machines, despite never having been that big winning box across the millions of living rooms across this big world. So whether they were the big winners in their generation at the sales register or not is secondary with contestants of this list. What matters more is how great were they with that look that they had next to your stylish TV and on that fancy TV stand of yours in your living room. Well, this little Genesis timeless design has been one of the greatest of all time, and that's why it's here on this list and at this lucky number 7 spot where it certainly belongs. So it's only going to continue to get gooder as we continue to climb higher on our list. Who is next up at our number 6 spot? Who are we going to find around the middle of this particular top 10 list now? Well, who do we have? What do you know? It's going to be the big dog who beat our big Genesis boy in sales, and apparently looks as well, because the Super Nintendo is the one who is at this 6th spot on this list. Well, at least one version of the Super Nintendo's designs did beat the Genesis's look, but we are going to pretend that that other one did not happen and do our best to ignore it for this list. Yes, I'm referring to that unattractive and really bland purple and gray one. Yes, that one. So coming into this world on November 21st of 1990 and going on to sell a respectable 49 million units, but unlike the Genesis, that, as far as I know, only had one physical version at a time for all of its markets. The Genesis arch-rival, the Super Nintendo, however, had a very different-looking Japanese and European version of their console from the United States as one. And it's that UK and Japanese version that has made it to this list and not the American one. So why do I like the Japanese version so much more than the American version? Because the Japanese version is just so much more aesthetically pleasing and memorable with its design and look than its much more plain and basic-looking US counterpart. And also right off the bat, too, with the Japanese version, is that it also has that little bit of color splash at its upper right there that just really helped to make that version a bit more vibrant and also gave it just a bit of a livelier appearance than that much more zombie-like and ho-hum-looking American version. And like how a little bit of salt that just goes such a long way on a nice big quality steak, that little splash of colors just went such a long way in helping to give that Japanese version just a bit more visual excitement than its much more plain and lifeless-looking American counterpart. Although, I must concede that I do quite like that ingenious color combination of the purple and light gray, but at the end of the day, that's all that it's going for and absolutely nothing else. So of course, that was never going to be enough. What more do I need to say about it? Its overall shape was a lot more generic and unexciting. Its overall design was just so much more simple and not so very creative at all. But the Japanese and UK version not only did it have a few more colors to brighten its look, it was just a lot more adorable, memorable, smartly designed and cleanly looking, as well as being a lot more compact and sleeker in appearance too. But this has quickly become a Super Nintendo versus Super Nintendo discussion and analysis, and that was never really the focus of this video or this number 6 spot. So let's get ourselves back on track here and remember why the Super Nintendo was able to beat out that stupendously awesome-looking Sega Genesis. Probably mainly because it was just a little more cutesy and adorable looking overall, and just had a slightly more intelligently looking design overall as well. But unlike our Sega Genesis pal though, which had the looks but arguably didn't have the better internal tech that allowed the Super Nintendo console to become the little gray box that could, with both its internals and externals of course, and all that is why it has gone down in history as one of the more charismatic and memorable ones, as well as being a more popular console of its generation. And those reasons are also why it still shows up on people's Christmas trees these days during the holidays, and why it's been still making some artistic homage appearances on these more recent gaming hardwares of ours.